At the dawn of the 4th century, the Roman Empire stood as the axis of the known world. A civilization that measured its reach not by borders, but by horizons. Its legions had marched from the deserts of Mesopotamia to the misty cliffs of Britain. Its laws shaped nations. Its marble cities gleamed like scattered jewels across the earth. Rome was power perfected, disciplined, organized, seemingly eternal. Yet within its heart, something quiet, almost invisible, was stirring, not by conquest, but by conviction, not by sword, but by word. It was the whisper of a faith unlike any Rome had ever known, a faith that bowed to no emperor, but to a crucified carpenter from Galilee. And in that whisper lay a revolution. This is the story of Rome's final and fiercest attempt to silence that voice, to erase a faith that refused to die. A story written in fire, sealed in blood, a clash between an empire built on dominion and a kingdom built on devotion. But this is not the story of how an empire crushed a religion. It is the story of how that religion conquered an empire. Sit back as I narrate to you the account of the Great Persecution, the age when Emperor Diocletian unleashed the empire's full might against the followers of Christ. A time when faith was tested in fire, when conviction met the sword, and when men and women of unshakable belief stood face to face with death and would not bow. In this account brought to you by the Chronicles of Truth, we'll take you through the rise of Diocletian and his quest to restore Rome's ancient gods. The decrees that outlawed the name of Christ. The stories of martyrs who defied the flames. And the turning of history itself, when the faith of the persecuted triumphed over the empire of their oppressors. This is the story of Rome's fight against a faith that would not die. Yet in trying to destroy it, the empire gave it everlasting glory. The date was February 23, 303 AD. Across the empire, the Romans celebrated the Terminalia, the festival of Terminus, god of boundaries and endings. But on that day, the Emperor Diocletian, the self-proclaimed restorer of Roman virtue, chose to draw a new kind of boundary, not on a map, but upon the soul of an empire. He would mark the line that no Christian was allowed to cross. At dawn the next morning, as sunlight spilled across the imperial capital of Nicomedia, the Praetorian Guard marched, not toward some distant frontier, but toward a basilica that stood in view of the emperor's own palace. Their orders were clear. The great doors were smashed open. Scrolls and scriptures, the sacred writings of a forbidden faith, were seized and hurled into a roaring fire. Then, with hammer and iron, the soldiers began to tear the church apart, stone by stone, until not one remained upon another. Outside, an imperial edict was nailed to the forum wall for all to see. Its decree was absolute: destroy their houses of prayer, burn their books, outlaw their gatherings, erase their name. Thus began what history would call the Great Persecution, the empire's final and fiercest war against the followers of Christ. For 10 years, the full crushing weight of Rome would fall upon a people whose only weapon was faith. It would forge saints and expose traitors. And in its flames, it would decide the spiritual future of Western civilization. The storm broke not in chaos, but with chilling precision. It was February 24th, 303 AD, a date that would sear itself into the memory of the Christian world. The day before, the Grand Basilica of Nicomedia had been torn to the ground, its walls shattered by imperial decree. And now, across the Roman world, Diocletian's first edict thundered into law. The command that followed was absolute and unmistakable. Every church was to be destroyed. All sacred writings burned. All Christian property confiscated. Those who held office or influence were to be stripped of their rank. Those within the emperor's household reduced to servitude. It was not a moment of frenzy, but of design, a cold bureaucratic war against the soul of a people. In the east, under the watchful eyes of Diocletian and his zealous Caesar Galerius, the machinery of persecution moved swiftly. In Nicomedia, Antioch, and Alexandria, soldiers tore through Christian assemblies, toppling altars and desecrating sacred vessels. The historian Lactantius, who witnessed these events firsthand, wrote that it was as though the world had gone mad, with scrolls cast into fires, and holy men dragged into the streets to be mocked before the idols of stone they had refused to worship. The bishops faced a cruel dilemma: surrender the scriptures and live, or resist and die. Some gave in, handing over the holy books in tears, hoping to protect their congregations. These were branded traitors, the ones who handed over. But others stood firm, knowing their resistance meant torture or death. The betrayal of those who faltered would echo through centuries. In North Africa, where the faith ran deep, this wound festered into a lasting division. A rigorous movement arose, the Donatists, who declared that those who had compromised under persecution could no longer be priests, nor could the sacraments they offered be valid. It became a bitter war within the church itself: mercy versus purity, grace versus law. And though the great persecution would one day end, its shadow would linger through this schism for more than 100 years. But the empire was not finished. In the spring of that same year came the second edict. The net was cast wider. All clergy were to be arrested, bishops, presbyters, and deacons alike. Eusebius of Caesarea, himself a witness, described the prisons of the East overflowing with men of faith, so many confessors that there was no room left for criminals. Chains rattled through the night, and hymns were sung in the darkness of cells. By autumn, a third edict followed, deceptively merciful in tone. It offered freedom to any clergyman who would sacrifice to the Roman gods. It was the empire's psychological snare, not a sword, but shame. Diocletian believed that breaking the shepherds would scatter the flock. Some did falter, men of learning and faith, crushed under the weight of pain. But countless others refused, choosing imprisonment, exile, or death rather than dishonor the name of Christ. Then came the most dreadful decree of all, the Fourth Edict, issued in early 304 AD. This time, no one was exempt. Every man, woman, and child was commanded to appear before their local magistrate and offer sacrifice to the gods of Rome. The act was to be certified by an official document, the libellus, proving their obedience. To refuse meant death, and so the persecution became universal. It no longer targeted bishops or clergy alone. It reached into every home, every heart, every conscience. Rome had drawn a line across the soul of the empire and demanded that every citizen choose which side they stood on. Some complied in fear, others hid in mountains, caves, and forests. But many stood firm and walked willingly into martyrdom. In the east, Galerius pressed the campaign with ruthless vigor. It was he who urged Diocletian toward extermination, and it was under his governance that the persecution reached its bloodiest heights. But even his cruelty could not silence faith. From every province came stories that would outlive the empire itself. In Nicomedia, where it all began, a high-ranking officer in the imperial guard, a man named George, heard the edict read aloud in the forum. When the decree was posted, he tore it down in defiance. Before Diocletian himself, George declared his allegiance to Christ alone. The emperor, stunned by the betrayal of one of his own soldiers, offered him wealth, lands, and command if he would only recant. But George refused. He was tortured on the wheel, burned with fire, and finally beheaded. April 23, 303, the date would echo through the ages. Saint George the Martyr, the soldier who fought not for Caesar, but for heaven. In Rome, the persecution struck the heart of innocence. A young noble girl, Agnes, barely 13, had vowed herself to Christ. When she rejected the advances of powerful men, they denounced her as a Christian. Threats of death could not move her. When she was stripped in the public square, the story goes, her hair grew miraculously long to cover her nakedness. She was condemned to fire, but the flames would not touch her. In the end, she was executed by the sword, her name forever a symbol of purity and courage. Within the imperial palace itself, another story unfolded, that of Sebastian, captain of the Praetorian Guard. For years, he had lived a double life, serving Diocletian while secretly ministering to imprisoned Christians. When his faith was discovered, the emperor, feeling betrayed, ordered him to be executed by archers. Tied to a post, Sebastian was pierced with so many arrows that he was left for dead, a living hedgehog, one historian wrote. But he survived. A Christian widow named Irene nursed him back to health, and when he recovered, he did not flee. He returned to confront Diocletian in the palace corridor, rebuking his cruelty. The emperor ordered him clubbed to death. The man who survived the arrows was silenced by the truth he refused to deny. In Alexandria, the storm burned even fiercer. There lived Catherine, a young woman of noble birth and exceptional intellect. Brought before Emperor Maxentius to defend her faith, she debated his pagan philosophers and, according to tradition, converted many of them. For this, they were executed, and she was condemned to die on the spiked breaking wheel. When she touched it, the wheel shattered. She was beheaded instead. Her courage became legend, a triumph of wisdom sanctified by faith. The city's patriarch, Peter of Alexandria, guided his flock through years of terror. When he was finally arrested, the authorities feared a public uprising if he were executed openly. Peter, unwilling to endanger his people, agreed to a secret death. He directed his captors to break through the back wall of his prison cell, so he could be led quietly away and slain. His head was struck from his body in silence. The church called him the Seal of the Martyrs, the last of Alexandria's great bishops to die in that dark age. Farther north, in Antioch, the scholar Lucian, a theologian and teacher of Scripture, was imprisoned for 9 years. He endured hunger, torture, and darkness, but never recanted. Too weak to stand, he celebrated the Eucharist one last time for his fellow prisoners, using his chest as the altar. When asked to renounce his faith, his final words were simple and eternal: "I am a Christian." Eusebius, in his Martyrs of Palestine, records scenes of almost unspeakable cruelty. Men burned slowly over coals, women thrown to wild beasts, entire families executed before one another's eyes. But he also records something more: the paradox of joy in the midst of torment. The condemned sang hymns as they died. The arenas, built to humiliate them, became sanctuaries of witness. Even executioners, struck by the calm courage of their victims, sometimes laid down their swords and joined them. Those who survived went underground, into caves, fields, and the catacombs, vast tunnels beneath the cities of the dead. There they prayed in whispers, beside the bones of those who had already given their lives. They hid fragments of Scripture in sealed jars, knowing discovery meant death. Every gathering was a risk, every act of worship a declaration of defiance. And yet, this was how the church was reborn. The empire thought it was crushing a rebellion. Instead, it was forging a revolution of the spirit. The more blood was shed, the faster faith spread. The persecutors could not comprehend it. To the Roman mind, suffering was disgrace. To the Christian, it was victory. To die for Christ was to triumph. To suffer in his name was to reign. From these ashes rose the cult of the martyrs, not a cult of death, but of life eternal. Their graves became altars, their anniversaries, feast days. Their blood, their relics, their stories became sacred treasures, reminders that truth is worth more than breath. A century earlier, Tertullian had written words that now sounded prophetic. The blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. And indeed it was. For every believer slain, 10 more were born. For every church destroyed, 100 rose in secret. Rome had declared war on an idea, and the idea had won. The empire's fires had not consumed the faith. They had refined it. Over the course of 8 brutal years, the Great Persecution ravaged the Roman Empire. Its fires burned brightest in the east, under the merciless hand of Galerius. Yet as the empire bled its own conscience dry, something unexpected began to happen. The persecutor grew weaker, the persecuted stronger. Rome had unleashed every instrument of terror it possessed: prisons, confiscations, executions, humiliation. But the results were not unity, only unrest. The empire's heart was breaking under the weight of its own cruelty. The faith it sought to crush had become unkillable. And the end of the storm would not come through revolt, rebellion, or sword, but through the slow decay of the very man who had sustained the darkness. In 305 AD, the unthinkable happened. After 2 decades of rule, Diocletian, master of reform and architect of the Tetrarchy, voluntarily laid down his crown. He withdrew from public life to a vast marble palace by the sea, a fortress of retirement built in Dalmatia on the Adriatic coast. There, the old emperor tended to his gardens, claiming he preferred the scent of cabbages to the weight of empire. His abdication shocked the Roman world and left it in the hands of his protégés. In the east, his Caesar, Galerius, rose to supreme power. In the west, Constantius Chlorus held the senior seat until his death. And with Diocletian gone, the last vestige of restraint disappeared. Galerius, untempered and fanatical, believed he was the chosen hand of the gods, destined to erase the Christians once and for all. He unleashed a renewed wave of persecution across Asia Minor, Syria, and Egypt. But what followed was not triumph. It was slow disaster. As the years dragged on, reports reached the court that the empire was faltering. Economies strained, armies deserted, famine spread. The gods were silent. The Christian faith, though outlawed, scattered, and bloodied, was still alive, even growing. And Galerius himself was dying. By 311 AD, the once mighty emperor was a ruin of a man. Lactantius and Eusebius describe his final months with grim precision, his body consumed by disease, eaten alive from within by a rotting ulcer that bred worms and stench. No prayers to Apollo, no sacrifices to Jupiter could save him. In his agony, Galerius came face to face with a truth he could not command. Whether from fear, guilt, or a final spark of conscience, the persecutor who had sworn to annihilate the Christians now begged them to pray for him. On April 30th, 311, from his sickbed in Nicomedia, Galerius dictated a proclamation that stunned the empire. It was the Edict of Toleration, a document unlike anything Rome had ever seen. The emperor who had once ordered churches torn down and scriptures burned now admitted defeat. He confessed that his policy had failed, that the Christians, despite every punishment, had persevered in their determination. With weary pragmatism, he granted them legal existence once more, allowing them to rebuild their places of worship and to pray to their God, provided, as he phrased it, they did nothing contrary to good order. But the most remarkable line of all came at the end. In a strange twist of humility or terror, Galerius asked the Christians to pray for him. He implored them to intercede with their God for the health of the emperor and the safety of the state. It was the empire's first written confession that persecution had failed. Within days of signing it, Galerius was dead. The monster who had tried to exterminate faith was buried under its mercy. The great persecution in the East was effectively over. But the story did not end in the East. Even as Galerius's corpse was lowered into the earth, another drama was unfolding in the West, one that would alter the course of civilization. When Constantius Chlorus died in Britain in 306, his army refused to accept the rigid tetrarchic succession. Instead, the legions proclaimed his son Constantine emperor. It was an act of defiance that would echo through history. For 6 years, Constantine ruled the provinces of Gaul and Britain, strengthening his power, restoring order, and watching as the rest of the empire tore itself apart in civil war. His rivals in Italy and the East fought for dominance, but Constantine was patient. He waited, he built, and when the time came, he marched. In 312 AD, he led his army southward into Italy to challenge Maxentius, the tyrant who claimed the Western throne. The decisive confrontation would take place just outside Rome, at a crossing called the Milvian Bridge. On the eve of that battle, Constantine, a man raised in the courts of Diocletian, who had witnessed the persecution of Christians firsthand, experienced something that changed his destiny forever. According to Eusebius, who later claimed to have heard the account directly from the emperor's lips, Constantine looked toward the western sun and saw, above it, a blazing cross of light. Inscribed across the sky were the Greek words, Nu tau omicron tau nu kappa alpha. In this sign, conquer. That night, in a dream, Christ himself appeared to Constantine and commanded him to place the sacred sign upon the shields of his soldiers. It was a moment that bridged heaven and history. Constantine obeyed. He ordered his men to paint the chiro, the monogram formed by the first 2 letters of Christos, on every shield in the army. Then, beneath that radiant emblem, they advanced toward Rome. The battle was swift and decisive. Maxentius, attempting to retreat across the Tiber, was swept away when the bridge collapsed beneath his fleeing troops. His body was later dragged from the river, a drowned symbol of a dying world. Constantine entered Rome in triumph, not as a pagan victor, but as a man convinced he had conquered under divine favor. The empire of the Caesars had seen thousands of generals claim the blessing of the gods. But this time, the God who had granted victory was the God of the persecuted. The following year, 313 AD, Constantine met with Licinius, the new emperor of the East, in the city of Milan. There, the 2 rulers agreed on something unprecedented, the formal recognition of complete religious freedom. The Edict of Milan, as it came to be known, did not merely tolerate Christianity. It legalized it, protected it, and honored it. It declared that, to the Christians and to all others, full authority is given to follow that religion which each man believes best for himself. But Constantine went further. He ordered that all confiscated church property, basilicas, cemeteries, houses, and lands, be returned to Christian communities immediately, with compensation paid from the imperial treasury. The faith once branded as treason was now protected by the emperor's own hand. It was a breathtaking reversal, one of the most dramatic transformations in history. In less than a decade, the Church had risen from the catacombs to the palaces of power. The hunted had become the honored. The cross, once a symbol of execution, was now the banner of victory. As Constantine consolidated his rule, he began to see himself as chosen, not by the old gods of Rome, but by the living Christ. He began building churches across the empire, funding the reconstruction of those destroyed under Diocletian. He granted bishops privileges equal to the imperial bureaucracy, abolished crucifixion as a punishment, and made Sunday a day of rest. His mother, Helena, a devout Christian, became a symbol of piety in the new imperial household. According to tradition, she later journeyed to Jerusalem, where she is said to have discovered the true cross, the very instrument of Christ's crucifixion. In time, Constantine would unite the entire empire under his rule and lay the foundations for a new capital, Constantinople, a new Rome dedicated not to Jupiter, but to Christ. The empire that once burned churches now built them in marble and gold. Yet this transformation came with paradoxes. The faith that had survived by humility would now have to survive power. The church that had thrived under persecution would soon face the test of privilege. But that would be the next chapter of history. For now, the great persecution was over. The age of the martyrs had given birth to an age of emperors who bore the cross. What began with fire and chains ended with an edict of freedom. And what Rome could not destroy, it was destined to crown. By the close of the 4th century, the transformation was complete. In 380 AD, Emperor Theodosius I issued the Edict of Thessalonica, declaring Nicene Christianity the official state religion of the Roman Empire. Pagan temples faded into silence. The cross rose where idols had stood. The same empire that had persecuted Christ's followers now declared his name openly in its legislation, its art, and throughout its culture. From Nero's torches to Diocletian's flames, the blood of the saints had written its victory across the centuries. And the Church, born in catacombs, now sat upon the throne of Caesar. The persecuted had become the architects of civilization. Faith had outlived the empire that tried to erase it. Rome had fallen, but the kingdom that conquered it had no end. The Great Persecution was Rome's last and fiercest war against the Christian faith, the empire's final attempt to silence a truth it could neither understand nor contain. The might of legions, the decrees of emperors, the fires of torture, all were summoned to break the will of a people whose only weapon was belief. And yet, Rome failed. Its marble temples crumbled, its idols turned to dust, but the faith of the crucified carpenter endured. The empire of iron and blood was conquered, not by rebellion or sword, but by love, by endurance, and by the quiet power of conviction. What began in secret houses and catacombs outlasted the palaces of kings. The cross that once marked the death of a criminal became the standard of emperors and the symbol of salvation. The persecuted became the heirs of Rome. The ashes of the martyrs became the seed of a civilization. Their blood they shed upon the earth became the ink with which history penned a new world. This is the story of how a kingdom without armies overcame the empire that ruled the earth, and how faith, born in weakness, triumphed in eternity. This has been the Chronicles of Truth, where faith, history, and revelation converge to illuminate the stories that shaped our world. If this story moved you, give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who loves history told through the lens of faith. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next episode, where we'll explore how the Gospels were written, what inspired each of them, and the differences and similarities that bind them together. And tell us in the comments, what moment in this story of courage and conviction spoke to you the most? Until next time, keep seeking, keep watching, and keep believing. For truth, no matter how persecuted, always rises.